repair, like my friend here says, the idea is to restore. So for those who are lawyers, and in the, I think both the civil and the Commonwealth tradition talks about restoring the status quo ante. You restore to the original condition. But I'm not sure that in every case you want to restore to the original condition. So sometimes the original condition was an operative condition. So it's repair or restoration in today is normally viewed in the context of reparations. Which could also, and I agree with my friend, include one notion of affirmative action. Because when we talk about reparations, very often we locate ethics costs to individuals and communities. That's true. But very often in the context of individuals, wrong. And in the context of communities, essentially symbolic. But affirmative action in favor of communities not be much more than symbolic. If they were communities that were historically deprived for holding different political views, for belonging to different traditions in the nation's history. So that would include the whole discourse on affirmative action. Now, the idea of repairing is to acknowledge the experience of victims in the context of what happened, whether it was an armed conflict, whether it was an authoritarian regime or dictatorship, but it's acknowledged. So I would suggest that the essence is twofold. For many victims, it represents an acknowledgement by the state, or an institution appointed by the state, of their own experience. And for some that might even be all the required. Somebody sitting somewhere in a position of authority finally recognizes that all this while I was stigmatized, I was labeled all kinds of things. My name was used in different ways. I was called an enemy of the people. I have been vindicated through appearing before a formal body constituted by the state to interrogate the past. So the recognition of what an individual, a victim has gone through, for them, that's the acknowledgement they are fine, they can move on. And you see that this is useful because many times in the context of transitional justice, even where a state wants to engage in transitional justice, the state may still be in denial. Because key institutions or individuals in the state may have had a history in the previous experience. Or the state wants to contain that experience in a way that manages a post-transition situation that for the sake of stability. So it's very useful, the idea of recognizing what the individual has gone through. Now, the second is the idea of restoring people to their status. So you represent an effort to restore a victim to a state where they are able to survive the effects of the violence or the human rights violation that they experience. So while the idea of restoring is not to restore to the original status, because that can never be achieved, and I think the point made that point, that it can never be achieved to restore up to that level. But you put people in a condition that they are able to survive the legacy of the violence that they have endured. And you see, both in the Tunisian experience and around the world, people lost their breadwinners, people suffered all kinds of violations, which resulted in total loss of income. Some were perhaps targeted in a way that their businesses closed down. They were forced to become penniless, which meant that if you want to begin to restore them, where do you want to start? So that's the challenge about where you want to start. So many victims also continue to need mental, psychosocial, and other kinds of medical support, health support. So the idea of restoring them becomes a critical component in that discourse. But we have those categories of victims who, because of the experience they went through, who have ongoing mental or health needs. And how do they want to address the fact of that experience? And they have a human interest experience. And my colleague Howard, we worked together in the Sierra Leone Youth Commission. We had a young man who was a double amputee. And it was his friend that caught his arm. And so we employed him as a statement taker, and we were paying him $300 a month for just a short period. And when he came to testify in one of our public hearings, we asked him a question. When you see that friend who has potentially both their hands, will you be willing to reconcile with him now? And he said, before I took on this job, if I had seen him, I would have killed him. Because every day I went home as a human. My children are out of school. People drive us away from their teaching camp where we're staying. I lost sense, I lost my dignity, I lost my sense of humanity. But today, you give me this job, I know it's a temporary job, it will last for only 4 months. But suddenly when I leave the offices and I'm going home, I buy biscuits, I bread, I think for my children, they see me coming home, they run to come and hug me, and they're so happy, and my wife's smiling. So suddenly I'm feeling like an important member of society. In this new state, if I see that, my friend, I'm not willing to sit down with him to talk about how to capitalize the conversation. So I think it's changing the material condition of the victim that gives people a sense of hope. So they will never recover from the loss. But the idea is to give hope. How do you intend through repairing to give hope to the experience of clinicians in a way that they feel that the future is better than the past? Now, the challenge of repairing or reparations is where there are competing needs on the state. So how would you want to address the legitimate needs of the victims in a way that the state is able to perform the obligations of a responsive state? And I also think we need to appreciate that no form of reparations can compensate for the harm done. And I think my friend here made that point. What kind of compensation can compensate for the harm done? There's none. So when we then focus on reparations alone, without more, all the various things that colleagues on this panel have talked about, the impression is that you're actually trying to buy the victim's silence. So it's not the reparation clause in trying to construct it and this experience. Another dilemma is given the competing needs on the states. When you prioritize certain victims over others, then it looks like you are prioritizing people suffering. Everybody's suffering is equal. And yet there may be some of us who have more needs than the others. So how do you manage that? You don't want to become a nation of victims. This is a proud country. This is a proud society. You don't want to be a nation of victims. So you don't want to stay in a state of victimhood. But yet you want to acknowledge that there are certain members of society who may have suffered more than the others, and who by the nature of their suffering is less able to move into the new society that is being constructed and to be active participants in that new society. So how do you weigh the balance without giving also the impression that they are saying that one suffering is more important than the other suffering? So I think that going forward is important to create a mechanism and policy framework for future reparations. I know the fact that some reparations have been made to certain groups of people. I think it's useful to go beyond that and say, this is a mechanism, and this is a policy framework on which we will anchor reparations. Then I come to the last subject, which is reconciliation, which still comes from the idea of restoration. But there is restoring the relationships that may have broken down. And I think the revolution was evidence that the relationship between the governing and the governed had clearly broken down. So the question to you then is, what will become reconciliation in Tunisian society? I ask this question because around the world there are several approaches in terms of how people define reconciliation. For many, reconciliation is when you have crime and punishment, and that's the only time you can have reconciliation. So if you say there can be no peace without justice, it's a legitimate aspiration that all those who do wrong should be punished. And for some of the victims, and they feel the perpetrator working with them, unless that perpetrator has been punished in accordance with the law, their reconciliation or their healing cannot begin. But for some, they stay in that box. It's crime plus punishment, then there's reconciliation. For many others, they argue that no, it's all about jobs. It's about economic opportunities. Young people don't have jobs, so let's give them jobs. Once we do the jobs, things will fall in place, and we don't need to get into the past and reconcile. Another will argue that no, what we need is a new governance framework, a new governance ethos, focus on service delivery. What the state is performing, why do we need to start talking about the past? It's too hard to let us get into the past. I think we need to recognize that all of these are important, but what we need to appreciate that some of them are enablers and not the key element of reconciliation. When you create economic opportunities, that helps. When you strengthen the governance system, that helps. What they have to do is to create a missional environment where the kinds of encounters that families on this table have talked about. So I think that at each basic, if you want to focus on reconciliation in Tunisian society, from experience around the world, there are certain elements that certainly you might want to review. The first question is the whole question of accountability for the past. Whether it's through criminal prosecutions, through TRC, or through mechanisms using cultural approaches that complement both the criminal prosecution and the reconciliation commission. But it is important to recognize those. And within these processes, or even outside them, to provide a space for the narratives of victims and perpetrators to be shared. And from there to develop a shared national narrative of this is our experience. This is what happened to us. Whether the narrative has been include both groups at the regional level, at the ethnic level, at the religious level, but those narratives are important. If those narratives are part of the experience of the past, they have to define the state and the exclusion or oppression that happened. I think it is important to also focus on some form of acknowledgement, as a minimum, an acknowledgement of what happened, of what people went through. Very often it's difficult to get people to acknowledge because they will say, what I was doing, I was right, I believe it was the right thing, therefore what should I acknowledge? But as a minimum, I say acknowledgement because ideally, what I like to see would actually be confessions and real apologies like those who did wrong. That's what we should aim for. But like Howard said, it's not a one-time event. It's a long-term process. But if it's possible to have some of those who say they have genuinely, regretted what they've done, to come and own up, acknowledge what happens, I think that helps. I think, what can advance that process is also an acknowledgement by the state itself. We have the state at its highest levels of key officials, or even representatives of some of those who were responsible for what happened in the past, themselves come to acknowledge. We know we did wrong, and we injured the Egyptian society, and we are sorry. Because for many people, that's not the demarcation between the past and the future, about the recognition of the things we've done wrong. And in some cases, like when we work with the president of Sierra Leone should have called attention to Sierra Leoneans for what happened. He did not commit the violations, but the state did a continuity. There is succession in government. From one government to the other, a new government assumes the obligations